Hello there. Today we're doing a review and rating for Widow Jane 10-year bourbon whiskey. We'll start with our behind the label segment where we'll dive into the history of the distillery and what makes the whiskey unique. Then we'll jump right into the tasting where we'll cover appearance, aroma and nose, taste profile, mouthfeel, and the finish. Most importantly, we'll give our 1 to 5 rating scale as well as how we match up against other reviewers and the whiskey community. Then we'll cool off our palates as we discuss recommendations on how best to appreciate the Widow Jane, with how to drink it, pairing recommendations, cocktail creations, and comparable alternatives. And it's all here at the Rebel Rater channel, where the rating revolution starts. Before we get into it, I've listed the high-level rating tiers here, but if you want the in-depth explanations, you can check back at the description below for a link to that video. In that video, I break down the rating scale and how you can use it as a guideline for how to think about purchasing and or consuming any of the whiskeys that we're going to review. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, Widow Jane Distillery is based out of New York, was founded in 2012, and is owned by Cacao Prieto. It's interesting because its owner, Daniel Prieto Preston, started Cacao Prieto originally as a chocolate company, sourcing its beans from his home in the Dominican Republic. They later expanded their product set and saw some success with their own distilled rums and liqueurs. That success, coupled with the great whiskey boom of the last decade, prompted them to create Widow Jane Distillery. Now, while they do source all of their whiskey, they distill in-house for proofing and do all the bottling in New York. One thing that is fairly unique here is they put their historical New York roots right into the whiskey. In fact, the whiskey's namesake is due to its blending process, where they blend sourced whiskey with limestone mineral water that comes straight from the Widow Jane mines in Rosendale, New York. Now, there is a slight bit of controversy here amongst the whiskey community. Many say the limestone water blend doesn't really add any flavor profile to it, much like Widow Jane claims, but regardless, I think it's cool that they want to incorporate something into their New York roots within their blend. The other controversy is that they have never disclosed where they source their whiskey from. Due to some of the flavor profiles, which we'll get into here shortly, many believe the bourbons are from distilleries in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana. It's rumored that the Tennessee bourbon is from Dickel, the Indiana bourbon from MGP, and the Kentucky bourbon, while still remains a mystery, is likely from Barton 1792, as their barrels are widely available for non-distiller producers, or NDPs as they call them. As a single barrel bourbon that can be sourced from a few unknown distilleries, the result is that each barrel will actually have a slightly different flavor profile to it. To that point, I think this is probably a good segue to jump into the whiskey stats here. A bit lofty, Widow Jane does come in at around 80 MSRP. Again, Widow Jane is a regular bourbon whiskey, so its only requirement is that its mash bill is at least 51% corn. Due to the multiple distillery sourcing, we can't get an exact percentage of the mash bill, but it comes in at a low 45.5 ABV and 91 proof. The bottle we're reviewing today is a 2022 from batch 663 and bottle number 412. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got with Widow Jane here. Now, one thing before we get into the tasting, if you haven't seen my other videos yet, I do have a pour that I poured right before the video started, as well as one that I've done for 30 minutes. The one with the red line here will be the one that I just poured prior to the video, and the unmarked one will be the one for 30 minutes, so that you can kind of check what I'm tasting as I'm going into it. So let's look a little bit at the appearance here. It's got this really vibrant copper color to it. It's really very pretty. As far as the clarity goes, there's just a few areas where I can see that it's a little cloudy in here. I know that Widow Jane is non-chilled filtered, so perhaps the abnormalities I do see in here might be the limestone water blend has something to do with it, but you know, who knows? It might just be part of the filtration process. As far as the viscosity goes, this is a 91 proof, so I would expect to see not very many legs, but it's actually kind of thick. It looks creamy, almost silky, really. For being a lower proof, I'm pretty impressed at the consistency here. Let's dive into the aroma and nose. Let's take a look at the first pour first. Just classic bourbon traits on the forefront. Corn, oak, barrel, char, vanilla. As can be expected from a 91 proof bourbon, not really any ethanol presence at all. Let's smell the 30-minute pour here. Oh, wow. So if anything, I just get a bigger burst of those classic bourbon flavors. Again, corn, oak, barrel char, vanilla. But on this one, I can get some more fruity notes, like almost apple or raisins. Very nice. There's almost like this unique, I want to say like cinnamon, almost like even a Coca-Cola. Yeah, like almost like a soda flavor to it. It's really interesting. I like it. So the lower proof here is probably why we get that, you know, classic burst of bourbon flavors here. You can't really notice it on the quick pour as you can on the 30-minute pour. But you definitely get those like fruity tones that I mentioned that were a little bit unique in that Coca-Cola flavor. They're much more muted at the direct pour, but the one that's been sitting out is wonderful. So overall, I think the nose is everything you would want out of a classic style bourbon. Let's get into the palate here. So the palate starts off surprisingly sweet. Again, getting more of those classic bourbon, vanilla, a little bit more corn on the palate than I was on the nose. I might even say sweet corn at that. I'm not really picking up on any fruity flavors. Let's try that 30-minute pour. Oh yeah. Oh, so smooth. You can't taste any of the ethanol. It's not hot at all. Really those classic bourbon flavors. And now I definitely am getting those more fruity flavors here. I want to say cherry. Maybe even a light orange to it. Now, even though I did say that there's not a big ethanol burst here, there is a surprisingly small little dose of heat. I know it's certainly not coming from the proof, so it's probably got a little bit of a higher rye mash bill here. It's giving me some spice and peppery tones. Almost spearmint because it's a little bit sweeter. Actually commingles with the flavors very nicely here. I've actually been looking for a little bit of like mineral or metallic flavor just because it has like that limestone water blend to it, but I'm not really getting any of that. As a matter of fact, for a 10-year-old bourbon, the lack of oak here on the palate is pretty surprising. Overall, really pleasant sip. Just not getting too much oak from it other than on the nose. Yeah. As far as the mouthfeel goes, the initial heat, there is some hotness to it. A little bit more on the quick pour. Again, at 91 proof, not very surprising. Probably just more of that rye mash bill that we're getting. Now, I mentioned earlier on the viscosity that it seemed to be more thick and creamy. I'm not getting a lot of thickness here. I'm getting more kind of silky, definitely a little bit of creamy. And then on the end here, it's very soft, almost like chewy even. Really great. On the finish, surprisingly, on the 30-minute one, I'm not getting much. The taste and the flavors just kind of dissipate very quickly. Now on the quick pour, the finish definitely has some pepper up front. Again, dissipates really, really quickly. So very short finish here. But there's almost like this, I definitely get that fruit taste now on the finish. But it's more like almost like a sour cherry candy. Really interesting finish here. Outside of that sharp pepper and that kind of sour cherry, a little bit of a pleasant caramel right at the end before it kind of fades off the tongue. All right, let's move into the rating, shall we? Now, we're going to put Widow Jane 10-year at a 4, meaning buy it. So I do highly recommend it. Though, admittedly, I'd probably say this is a low-end 4. So I might just say recommend rather than highly recommend. Now I got it at a 4 because it's just a great classic bourbon. It's got all those awesome flavors of corn, vanilla, oak, char, and the multi-distillery blend gives some unique tones to it. But my problem here is that those unique tones are a bit too subdued, and those classic flavors, while great, aren't really unique or memorable. In preparation for this video, I was actually thinking that once I get through 5 or so reviews, I might do a blind tasting, just so I could see if it's interesting, if my preferences are still aligned. But while I was thinking that, I also had the thought that I don't know if I'd be able to actually pick this out of a lineup just because it's so generic. But again, great bourbon. Now, the other factor that made this hard was the price point. At $80 MSRP, you'd expect a bit more uniqueness or a bolder flavor profile. Another thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is that with multiple blends, it means that each batch is going to be just a little bit different. On this bottle, personally, I'd recommend buying it even at that $80 price point because, again, just such a classic, great sipper. That being said, I could potentially see this dropping to a 3 for others if you happen to get a bad batch or a bottle. Which, after researching other reviews, it seems that some didn't really get the great experience that I got here with this bottle. So obviously at $80, probably not worth it to them. To be specific, I saw a lot of problems with the year 2017 and 2020 batches, but it seems like 2022 is a great year. I also read that many Widow Jane enthusiasts will call out batches to look for, so if you're willing to do a quick Google search, you can make sure that you can avoid getting a dud. I might even give a specific buying recommendation here in that I would almost recommend that you try buying it at a bar just to try it out, maybe even a friend's house, if you're not willing to meet that $80 price point. Now, I'm aware a lot of what I just said might seem like a downer, but more so than anything, I just want you, the viewers, to have all the knowledge you can so you can make an informed decision about your purchase. If it's any consolation, the Widow Jane team does a great job of following up on bad reviews. And I think, if anything, that really speaks volume to the effort that they've made to improve their product, as well as kind of the faith in the product that they have that they're actually sending to market. So kudos to them. Overall, I was pretty impressed with the Widow Jane 10-year that I got. Like I said earlier, the reviews I researched were all over the place depending on the year and the bottle, but most came in at around a 3 out of 5. Public sentiment also fairly varied, with 326 reviews on Total Wine at about a 4.8, and 994 reviews at distiller.com put it at about a 3.85. As promised, we'll also rank our whiskeys we review amongst themselves. So far, the list isn't too comprehensive yet, but nonetheless, we've got Old Forester 1920 right in front of Widow Jane 10-year for now. Now that we've done the rating, let's talk about some general recommendations on how best to enjoy Widow Jane. As far as drinking recommendations go, Widow Jane comes in at that lower 91 proof, so it's a very easy sipper if you're going to drink it neat. I wouldn't cut it or serve it on rocks. You'll already dilute some of the notes that are a bit subdued as it is. Make sure that it's at room temperature or even warm it with your hand to bring out some more expression on those subdued flavors. For pairing recommendations, the fruit tones and high oak char would go really well with some more delicate meat courses like short rib, lamb, swordfish, maybe even a crab cake might be good with it. For cocktail recommendations, I'm recommending the Brown Derby. It's 2 ounces Widow Jane, 2 ounces pink grapefruit juice, and about a 1/4 ounce of honey. It would be really great for a summer evening. I think the honey and grapefruit would add more to some of the fruity undertones, give it some of like an earthy sweetness to it. It'll really bring out a lot of those deeper tones that are under there in the whiskey. On to whiskey comparisons. On the low end, since many believe that Widow Jane is sourced from MGP, I'd recommend a similar brand in what's called Bell Mead. It's at $45 MSRP. It's got that same cherry fruit and oak char taste at that lower price point, but it does miss out on some of those complexities and uniqueness that you get with bourbons that are sourced from multiple distilleries. On the high end, I know this is a little bit of a cop-out, but Widow Jane 13-year is at $99 MSRP, but really I haven't seen it for less than $150. That is sourced solely from MGP, so a lot less complexity to the blend, but you get a big punch kind of showcasing the biggest fruit and oak flavors from it, and I find that that's been highly recommended. So again, I know it was a little bit of a cop-out, so I'll give you another kind of bonus one here. St. Cloud's 7-year bourbon is at $150 MSRP. It's matching those kind of notable oak, spicy, peppery characteristics that we talked about earlier, but where it takes it to another level, it's got some above average amount of citrus flavors to it. This is certainly at a higher proof point, so 122, and you'll get that bigger pop out of all of those flavors. And that's it for our tasting and review, folks. Widow Jane has all the things that you would be looking for in a bourbon. Since it's a bit pricier than most, perhaps buy it at a bar or try it at a friend's house to decide if it's for you. It's certainly for me, and I'll be sharing it with my friends who are looking for that classic bourbon vibe. So to wrap up here, if you want to be part of the Rebel Raider Nation and join us on our whiskey adventures, be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates on the latest rating reviews, leave comments on what notes and flavors you got, share your thoughts and feedback on the content that we have here, and please do suggest any whiskeys or other content that you would like reviewed. Thanks for watching, and I'm excited to continue the journey into the whiskey depths with you. The video may end here, but the rating revolution never stops. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.